So-Called is sponsored by loveboiseparks.org, which donates profits to support, promote, and preserve open spaces in Boise, Idaho. Use promo code SOCALLED for 10% off all your purchases at loveboiseparks.org.
You really need to think critically about your role and who you are as a person and what your strengths are, and lean on those and build your organization or your business or your company, no matter what your role is. Like, be a part of that and you will have job security.
This is Mark Wojcik, and I'm wondering, how's your so-called career? Welcome to So-Called, the podcast that explores the why and how of work. On today's episode, we meet Ali Rabe, Executive Director at Jesse Tree, human rights attorney, and state Senate candidate for District 17 on the Boise Bench. When we met, I asked Ali to tell me what Jesse Tree does.
Jesse Tree prevents homelessness and eviction from happening to people and from happening to our community. And I am really passionate about what we do because Idaho is not in such a state as, our neighboring states, Washington, California, and urban centers that have tens of thousands of homeless people living outside. We can still prevent this from happening to our community. And we've got to do that one by one, and also by continuing to invest in affordable housing solutions. But Jesse Tree provides one-time information, rental assistance, and support to people that are experiencing eviction due to a temporary financial crisis. So we see a lot of people who have just had a layoff, their hours were cut, they had some sort of a healthcare crisis, some large expense, a household composition change, a divorce, roommate moved out, and they're in this place where they can't pay their rent and they're being evicted. So our social workers work with people through this situation. We create a budget with them. We create a household and life plan, essentially, and help them come up with ideas to increase their income and cut expenses, and we'll connect them to resources that they need in the community. And then we work really closely with landlords throughout the process, and we'll set up a payment plan and chip in a portion of the rent that's owed to keep the tenant in their home, essentially. We also work really closely with eviction court, so we're constantly in eviction court too, but that's what we do.
You're working with clients, you're working probably with policy and advocacy and fundraising, yep. All of those things.
Yeah, so I run the show. Luckily, we have 9 staff, 5 paid staff, and 4 AmeriCorps Vistas who are full-time. So I just kind of get to manage everyone, and I'll take on a case here or there if needed, because I'm our only attorney on staff. Mm-hmm. And then work with partners, definitely do a lot of advocacy with local government bodies, currently trying to work through the Supreme Court on some issues. And then I'm in charge of keeping the money flowing too, keeping everyone paid and keeping everyone's rent paid too. So.
Yeah, and I'm guessing you are, probably always busy, but maybe more so with the pandemic, or not yet?
Yes, it's been incredibly busy. So we've had, call volume on our housing crisis line has tripled. So, but my staff are just incredibly flexible, and they adapted, our process and the way that we work was already kind of set up as a crisis response system, because we were already in a housing crisis before this happened.
Right.
So we just kind of had to scale what we were already doing. And so we were able to recruit 10 really dedicated volunteers on the housing crisis line to help address increased volume. Our staff member managing that created all these amazing training materials that could be done remotely and transfer the phone line remotely and all of that. This all happened within a week. It was pretty amazing. We got a ton of support from the community that, just people really rallied around us. So we were able to hire 2 new staff, and they got up and running really quickly. So it's been definitely busy, but also really amazing to see the response that the community has had around this issue.
What about your path? How did you end up where you are, and what drove that?
So I wanted to be an attorney since I was really young. I just thought it would be cool, and I really liked reading and writing and arguing. I was always a little bit fiery. So, but then I ended up interning at the prosecutor's office in college just through a connection, and got really disheartened by what I saw in there and kind of the culture and how pro jail and like max sentencing prosecutors' offices are.
Mm-hmm.
I also had a close family member that was in and out of criminal justice system when I was a kid, and so saw how that really doesn't work. So I went to law school wanting to be a public defender. And I actually did that for a while. I interned at quite a few different public defenders' offices, and I got to work in the juvenile court system and work with kids, who are mostly being charged with just minor theft or minor drug possession crimes, which was, just really hard. And as a public defender, you always feel like you're not doing enough and you're just part of this bigger problem, which is, that we have these policies in place that keep people going back to the system. And so, I don't know, from there, my career has taken many different turns, so I could go on, but just ended up kind of working at higher levels and then ended up working in housing specifically. And I've just followed the opportunities as they've come up, and been really tried to think outside the box with my career, so I'm here now. But I do go to court sometimes, and try to keep my license fresh. So
just as you've described it, right, you mentioned the issues that you observed with, incarceration and max sentences and moving to housing. And now with what Jesse Tree does, that seems to be, kind of getting out in front of that rather than on the punishment end of things.
I got involved in housing because I ended up interning my 1L year of law school, interning at a public defender's office in Cambodia. Long story, but I studied abroad there, wanted to go back, and I was also interested in public defense. And my law school had this opportunity to work for a public defender's office in Cambodia. And I was like, sounds perfect. So, I was working in the jails, talking to people, and what I kept hearing over and over again was that people were losing their land. So, and that's all they wanted to talk to me about. They didn't care about the motorcycle they had stolen or the phone cards they had stolen. It was like, well, I did this because this big agro-industrial company is coming into my community and they took my land. And so I can't farm anymore and I have no source of income. And so I actually went back to Cambodia to study land rights and work on advocacy for indigenous groups and communities that were having their land taken from them. But it's, without land, without a home, without a place to live, you can't do anything else. You can't sustain a job. You can't sleep. You can't shower. You can't prepare food. So it's, home is really just kind of the root of, all these other issues in our society. And so I feel really passionate about keeping people in their homes.
Ali says a housing-first approach is beneficial for clients who need housing and a policy that makes financial sense for the community.
And research has shown if we just as a society invest in putting homeless people in housing, our communities save millions of dollars. We know in Ada County, each person that's homeless costs the community $53,000 per year in supportive health emergency services. New Path was this new affordable housing development that went up downtown. They housed, 54 chronically homeless folks, and they just did a study and showed that saved the community over $1 million in 1 year.
You mentioned you're running for District 17. So
Yeah.
how did that come about? And is it an extension of what you're doing now or separate from, or how does it fit?
I'm still trying to figure out how it all fits together. I wear two hats sometimes, sometimes it's one or the other, but it's been really interesting for sure. Basically, I met Marianne Jordan through my work in the community. We spoke on a panel together and then kind of became friends. And she called me up one day and we got coffee and she told me she was retiring and told me she wanted me to run for her seat essentially. And my first question was, why me? Why are you doing this to me? But she just said, like, she believed in me and she saw what I did with Jesse Tree and the work that I did there. And she wants someone who's younger to step into a role in the Senate. The average age in there is going on 60 and it's mostly male and, people from a corporate background a lot of the time. So, I'll be able to bring a different perspective in, and she really wanted me to do it. So, I took on the job with her encouragement for sure. And ultimately, I did just really feel like more young people in general need to step up, more women need to step up. And I didn't necessarily want to because I think I'm a woman and I doubted myself and my ability to do it all. But it's just, it felt like it was almost a moral obligation for me to do it and take that opportunity. Also, working at Jesse Tree and having grown up in Idaho, just seeing all the issues that our state is facing and the legislature is not addressing because of all the, kind of show of distractions they've been running the last couple of years, particularly this last session, and just wanting to bring in my experience, my perspective, my ability to tell those stories, share the data that I know, and get some things done, particularly around housing and criminal justice reform. So, yeah.
Well, I admire you and thank you for doing it, because it is a big ask, right? I mean, to take on a role like that. So thank you for doing it.
Yeah. Well, I think the campaigning part is probably the worst part. I mean, it's at least 20 hours a week and you definitely don't get paid for that. So
yes, I can only imagine. Ali can expect to log some more hours on her campaign. Since we spoke, she won her primary race and will be on the ballot this November for the District 17 State Senate seat. Check the show notes at socalledpodcast.com for links to Ali's campaign website, Jesse Tree of Idaho, and other related content from this episode. Looking ahead to that, what are you most hopeful about if you take on that role? And then is there something that's like a concern for you in doing that?
I'm most hopeful about getting some things done and passed. And I have a lot of ideas around policy. Like I'd like this. And I mean, in this session in particular, there's a bunch of federal funding that's come through the state. And we're going to have to fight over where that goes and how that's allocated. And I'd really like the state to invest in a housing trust fund and getting and building more affordable housing and more housing across the state, especially in the Treasure Valley, where we are, one of the fastest growing areas in the nation. Yeah. And then I got some ideas around landlord-tenant law just from my work and housing policy that I'd like to get passed. And then criminal justice reform, there are so many opportunities, but it'll be interesting to see kind of what I want to be really strategic about the policies that I come forward with in my first session, but with COVID and how the criminal justice system has changed, like kind of what the most strategic first few policies are. I definitely think we need to address mandatory minimums, more rehabilitative programs for folks with addiction and mental health issues, and as well as juveniles. So I'm hopeful about that and excited, particularly about criminal justice, because I don't get to talk about that really in my day job as much. I'm concerned about the dynamic in the legislature and just kind of how extreme our country has become. I am very much like, let's get things done type person, no matter who's in the room and no matter where they're coming from. Like, I think we can all work together to get something done.
Yeah.
But I know that there are a lot of issues with partisanship right now, across our country. And our state legislature is no exception. I've been kind of frustrated with campaigning, talked to mostly Democrats in this round, but have talked to some Republicans as well. And as soon as they hear I'm a Democrat, no matter my background, no matter, who my opponent is or, what they think of me, outside of that, it doesn't matter. Yeah. I'm a Democrat. So I'm just like on their hit list, basically.
Yeah.
So that's been really frustrating, and it makes me feel sad about the state of our country and how divided it is.
Ali's career advice is both to look inward to assess your strengths and to engage deeply with your organization, regardless of your role.
I get asked a lot by college students what my advice to them is. And I think it is just what I said, like, be proactive, lean on the relationships that you have, and put yourself out there as much as possible. But I think also, like, having a career and finding a career that you're good at requires some deep dives, like personal deep dives into yourself, and like a lot of reflection around like what you really care about and what your strengths are. I've tried to, as much as possible with my staff, we really talk about our strengths. Like, what are we good at? How can we lean on those in our work to get more done? I think, a lot of younger people get a job and they read the job description and they think they just like do those things kind of like a little robot and then you're good to go, right? But you really need to like think critically about your role and who you are as a person and what your strengths are, and lean on those and be innovative and creative and take initiative and reach out to folks through your work and create relationships and, build your organization or your business or your company, no matter what your role is. Like, be a part of that and you will have job security.
Looking back, if you think about your career, what advice would you give your younger self?
I have one thing that I've been thinking about lately, and it's especially being a boss, it's like, don't be afraid to have tough conversations with people. I think through the first part of my career, particularly with like people who were my boss, even if I had an issue with how they were doing something or I disagreed with them on something, I would sometimes just defer instead of ask questions and push back. And like, yeah, I wish I had done more of that in the early stages of my career.
So Called is sponsored by loveboiseparks.org, which donates profits to support, promote, and preserve open spaces in Boise, Idaho. Use promo code SOCALLED for 10% off all your purchases at loveboiseparks.org. Our theme and transition music was composed by Roberto Cavaco. All other stylings are the sound of my voice. If you enjoyed today's episode, please let us know. Subscribe and leave us a review. So Called is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and wherever you get your podcasts.